Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. Today, we are diving into the world of short bedtime stories for children. And I know you guys, our listeners, are busy parents, so we want to look at efficient and effective ways that you can support your child's development, their well-being, within the constraints of a busy schedule. And one thing that kept coming up over and over again in our research was this idea of short bedtime stories.
Yeah, definitely. Short bedtime stories, they seem so simple, right? But they're surprisingly powerful, and there are so many angles to explore.
That's exactly what we want to do in this deep dive. So to give you a little bit of a roadmap, we've looked at a bunch of different blog articles that explore the benefits and even how to create these short bedtime stories. We've also got some information about the Fantasia Bedtime Stories app, which is a really cool AI-powered storytelling app. And we've even been able to get a little bit of insight into the thinking behind that app.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. So the first thing that really struck me as we were digging into these sources was this idea that short and sweet is the way to go. In fact, one of the articles actually called them 2-minute bedtime stories, which I thought was a brilliant concept. So why is that? What's the magic of keeping it short?
Yeah, so a shorter story is going to be easier to fit into your routine no matter how crazy busy things are, and that means you're more likely to be consistent, which is really important for a lot of these benefits that we're going to talk about.
Okay, so consistency is key. That makes sense.
Yeah. And then also, if you think about it, even with a 2-minute story, that can seem like a really long time to a child. And we found all sorts of age recommendations, like, 1 to 3 minutes for babies and toddlers, then, 3 to 5 minutes for like preschool age, all the way up to 10 to 15 minutes for older kids. Matching the story to their attention span is really important.
That makes a lot of sense. And, thinking about this idea of keeping things calm and consistent before bed, we came across a quote from a sleep expert, Dr. Rebecca Martinez, and she says that the most effective bedtime routines are consistent and calming. And she actually mentioned that short stories can help signal to your child's brain that it's time to wind down without overstimulating them.
Yeah, that overstimulation is a big thing to avoid.
Totally. It's almost like a gentle nudge towards sleep. So let's talk about that. How do these short bedtime stories actually improve sleep quality? What's the science behind that?
Well, when you think about it, kids have busy days. They're constantly being stimulated by new things and information, and all of that can kind of build up and make it harder to fall asleep. But when you share a familiar story with them, it helps ease their anxiety. It kind of gives them a single thing to focus on so they can push aside all the stimulation of the day. And then over time, they start to associate those stories with sleep, and it becomes like a comforting cue that tells them it's time to relax and drift off.
Okay, so it's like a signal that everything's okay. It's safe to fall asleep now. That's really interesting. And, it's not just about sleep, right? Our sources talked about how these short stories are great for language development.
Exactly. It might seem counterintuitive, right? Like, how can a 2-minute story really boost language development? But here's the thing. When you have a shorter story, every word counts, right? And kids are exposed to this rich vocabulary, these complete narrative structures, but it's all presented in these like bite-sized pieces that they can actually process and absorb.
This is like concentrated language learning.
Exactly. And then, how many times have you read the same bedtime story over and over again because your kid loves it?
Oh, countless times.
Right. But that repetition actually helps them solidify their language skills.
So those repeated requests are actually beneficial. They're not just a test of our patience. Okay, that makes me feel a lot better about that whole experience. Now, another benefit that really stood out to me was the bonding aspect. These short bedtime stories can really strengthen that parent-child connection.
Totally. It's all about those little moments of connection, right? The physical closeness of cuddling up together, the eye contact as you're reading, the shared experience of the story itself. It all adds up to this really special time for both the parent and the child. And when you do this consistently, it creates this feeling of security and trust that's so important for a child's development.
Absolutely. And it's not just the kids who benefit, right? I was surprised to see how much emphasis was placed on stress relief for the whole family, even for parents.
We're all so busy and stressed these days, and it's easy to get caught up in those racing thoughts, especially at the end of the day. But focusing on a simple bedtime story can be a real mental break. It allows you to kind of step back from the chaos for a few minutes and connect with your child in this really calming and meaningful way. Plus, there's actually a physiological benefit. The physical closeness releases oxytocin, which is also known as the bonding hormone, and that helps everyone feel more relaxed and connected.
That's amazing. So We've talked about all the whys behind short bedtime stories, but for parents who maybe aren't natural storytellers, what kind of advice do we find about actually creating engaging short bedtime stories?
Well, the sources give some great tips. Like they said, focus on gentle themes that are going to help your child relax and transition to sleep. So think about nature settings like a quiet forest or a peaceful ocean, or maybe gentle adventures where the characters go on a little journey and then return home safely. Stories about friendship and kindness are always good choices, as are stories that kind of mirror the transition from day to night.
I really like the idea of those gentle adventures, a way to spark their imagination without getting them all riled up before bed.
Exactly. And to make it even more engaging, try to personalize the stories. Maybe you create a character that's based on their favorite toy or their pet. You could set the story in a place that they know, like their own street or their favorite park. And of course, you can weave in their name, which always makes it extra special for them.
Those are all great tips. Now, shifting gears a little bit, one of our sources was all about this Fantasia Bedtime Stories app. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah. Fantasia Bedtime Stories is this AI-powered app that actually creates personalized bedtime stories for children. So basically, each night your child can become the hero of their own unique adventure. And the cool thing is that the app uses AI to generate both the story and the illustrations, which means it's like a totally new and immersive experience every single time. It's designed to be super convenient for busy parents because it takes the guesswork out of coming up with new stories every night.
That's fantastic, especially for parents who maybe aren't as comfortable making up their own stories.
Yeah.
And this app is widely available.
Yeah, you can find it on both the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store.
Okay, great. We'll be sure to include a link to that in our show notes.
Hmm.
And in doing our research, we also learned a bit about the people behind the app, right?
Right. Matteo Marzorati is one of the co-founders and the chief product officer of Fantasia. And he's got tons of experience in the tech world, particularly in SaaS, AI, and blockchain. And I also noticed that Fantasia has a presence on Unicorns Club.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, which is this platform that startups use to connect with investors. So it seems like they've got big plans to keep growing and developing their technology.
That's really cool. Now, moving back to traditional storytelling for a moment, one of our blog articles really focused on the core elements of what makes a great short bedtime story, whether you're making it up yourself or using an app like Fantasia. What were some of those key ingredients?
Well, the article said that, first of all, you need a clear and engaging plot with characters that kids can relate to. That's going to help keep them hooked within that short time frame. And of course, the brevity itself is crucial. You don't want to overstimulate them right before bed. The themes and any lessons you're trying to weave in should be age appropriate, something that resonates with your child's developmental stage. And finally, every great bedtime story needs a little bit of wonder and imagination. That's what makes it memorable and sparks their creativity. And speaking of benefits, there was this interesting study from 2018 that actually linked exposure to fiction with greater empathy in children.
Wow, that's fascinating. So it's not just about entertainment. It's actually helping them develop important social and emotional skills.
Exactly.
That's really powerful. Now, our sources also touched on the importance of creating a cozy reading environment. It's not just about the story itself, right? The
Yeah.
whole atmosphere plays a role.
Oh, definitely. You want to create a space where your child feels safe, comfortable, and ready to relax. So simple things like snuggling up with a favorite blanket or pillow can make a big difference. You could also play some gentle background music or maybe some nature sounds to create a more tranquil atmosphere. And some research has shown that having dedicated reading spaces in the home can actually increase a child's engagement with reading, which is great.
That's really good to know. And just to recap those specific recommendations about story length based on age, one of the blogs had a really handy breakdown.
Right. So for babies and toddlers, 0 to 2 years old, you're aiming for stories that are just 1 to 3 minutes long. For preschoolers, ages 3 to 5, a 3 to 5 minute story is usually ideal. For kids 6 to 8, you can stretch it to 5 to 10 minutes. And then for older kids, 9 and up, a 10 to 15-minute story is a good guideline. But of course, you always want to pay attention to your child's cues and adjust accordingly.
Well, as we wrap up this deep dive into short bedtime stories, it's clear that these seemingly small moments can have a huge impact on children and families. We've talked about how they can improve sleep quality, boost language development, strengthen that parent-child bond, and even provide stress relief for everyone involved.
Yeah, it's amazing to see how something so simple can be so powerful.
Absolutely. So to our listeners, I encourage you to think about how you might incorporate these insights into your own bedtime routine. Whether you're revisiting old favorites, trying your hand at creating your own stories, or checking out an app like Fantasia, these short, consistent moments of connection can make a real difference.
I agree. And before we sign off, I just want to leave you with this one last thought. What if these small, seemingly insignificant moments, these little windows of connection at the end of the day, are actually more important than we realize? What if they're shaping our children's development, their sense of security, and the strength of our family bonds in ways that we can't even fully grasp?
That's a really powerful thought. Something to ponder as we head into the night. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Step up your game, join the unicorns club. Making it rain, nothing ever enough. Invest in the future, watch it all blow up. Blow unicorns club, we taking it up.